Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch. Something's different. Like, what the? You're on the wrong side of the table. I'm supposed to be over there, but then...
Not today.
Not today. Kind of a Sadie Hawkins feel to this. And if you remember, Sadie Hawkins dances used to be where the girls asked the guys. They changed rules. So for this episode of Bring Back the Porch, Mayor Linnsie Clark is going to be asking the questions, and I am on the hot seat, so to speak. This episode of Bring Back the Porch brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home.
Welcome to Bring Back the Porch.
Thank you.
I'm Linnsie Clark, and here with me today is Brian Konrad.
That's right.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm very excited to interview you. One of my favorite qualities is curiosity, and you are a curious person.
I am.
In the sense that you have the quality of being curious, not that you are a peculiar person.
Yes. Thanks for making that designation. There'd be some out there who would argue with you.
Oh, well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to be in Medicine Hat, Alberta?
I was born in Medicine Hat.
Oh.
I come from a family that my grandfather, John Park, came to Medicine Hat in April of 1904. It wasn't even a city yet. It was still a town. It was the territory of Assiniboia. He came here with the CPR as a fireman. His plan, I learned through reading letters that he exchanged with my grandmother, they were then just engaged, was to make enough money to go back to Fleming, Saskatchewan, where she was, to buy a chicken farm.
Oh.
And he retired here in 1946, and he's now resting comfortably out in Hillside. So deep roots in the community. I always joke that I was born by the third lamppost in the arena parking lot, because that's where the old hospital was.
So did he never made it back to Fleming?
Never made it back to Fleming.
Oh.
No, they stayed here, raised 4 in their family, including my mother. And I came along in 1955. Oh, God, that's old. Just seems like yesterday, but...
Time flies when you're having fun. Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned your grandfather worked with the rail.
Yep, CPR is an engineer.
The CPR, the railway, was a really important part of Medicine Hat's history and development. What are some of the milestones for Medicine Hat in relation to the rail? How did that help us to become the city we are today?
Well, we wouldn't be where we are if the CPR hadn't come through here and decided to put a bridge across the river. And as I've said in some of my our towns, right there the first controversy began. Because you know how we like to say, if we're going to put something here, somebody will say, oh, no, don't put it there, put it over here.
Yes.
The First Nations chief told the superintendent of the CPR, well, don't put your town site there, because it'll flood. They didn't listen. So.
And what happened?
It flooded many times, and probably many more times in the future. Hopefully not. We've got mitigation in place that will make it not as bad as it has been. But without the CPR coming through here on the CP main line, at one time we were the biggest place in Alberta. There was some consideration that we would be the capital of the new province of Alberta. That didn't happen. It might have changed the course of history.
Yes.
But without the CPR here and digging around for water, they wouldn't have found natural gas. Oh, look, we got a bonus here. So industry sprang up. The people in charge of the city at that time took a lot of risks. I'm pretty sure that the people of the day were going, what are you doing that for? It's not going to work. But they did it anyway, and we are here today. So it allowed our city to become the city of industry, which was its name for a long time, along with the gas city. So the CPR for many, many years was the biggest employer in the city of Medicine Hat as well.
Wow. And throughout the years, we've had a wide variety of industry in Medicine Hat. We've had a crayon factory, mattresses, munitions. Can you tell us a little bit about that era of time when we were very much a manufacturing city?
Well, there used to be in City Hall, in the old City Hall over the door, I believe, and it's at the Cypress Club now.
Okay.
A big panorama. It's a manufacturing center of Western Canada, and it's a shot of the area, basically the South River Flats, standing up against the Crestwood Hill and looking to the northwest. And that was where all the industry was located. You had, there was the Preston Mills was there, the Crane, McAvity Foundry. Back then it was just the foundry. Lots of different industries. Like I said, mattress factory, crayon factory, the candy factory. We had a candy factory down there. Of course, Medalta potteries, Alberta clay products. The mills were set up along that line because that was able to get their product out to the rest of Canada. It was a happening place in around, I think, I was looking yesterday, I think from something like 1908, 1909 to about 1914, the population doubled. It went from about, I think, just over 6,000 to close to 12,000.
So when was there a shift? So there, we no longer have mattress factory or crayon factory. Was that a post-war, pre-war type of thing?
A lot of it was, they had what they called, I think in 1914, a year of adjustment. Nice way to say a recession. Medicine Hat didn't suffer as much as some of the other places, but then when the First World War came along, it pretty well put the brakes on a lot of things. And technology changed in that 4 or 5 year period of the First World War. And, products that might have been in demand once now are being made somewhere else or made cheaper somewhere else or not being made at all. So things changed. And then from, 1920 through to, I guess, the end of the Second World War, Medicine Hat pretty much stayed the same size. And after the Second World War, when the economy got going again, we saw more industry coming into Medicine Hat and building houses like crazy and homes, and people wanted to come and live here and work here, and so it goes.
Yes. Well, you mentioned one of the Indigenous leaders who was here at our inception kind of warned us about the location, possibly. And Medicine Hat, the name itself suggests our rich Indigenous history. I know that there are a number of different stories about where we got our name. Which one are you most familiar with?
I've heard them both, and I'm not sure really if I have them committed to memory. But the place where the medicine man lost his hat is, right. I guess the word Samus comes from that. And there's the myth of creation outside the council chambers that I think James Marshall put up that explains how we got to be here.
Yes, there's a beautiful mural at City Hall that describes one of the stories. I view it as the more late night, or it's a little darker version of the story. It involves a sacrifice of some kind. So and there's even more than that. And then of course we have the Métis settlement that was here. Can you tell us a little bit about Saratoga Park?
Saratoga Park is the area, it's kind of like the crescent that is at the bottom of Shoalton Hill. They have been using that land since before any European settlers came here. Unfortunately, some people in the community did not like the fact that there were Métis living there. They used derogatory terms towards them. And yet, if you talk to the people who grew up there, that community, they had their own community. They were very tight-knit. And to this day, the roots from Saratoga Park are out in our community, and there's a lot of people that probably, I know I talked to one person who said that her father worked for the city, and he told his family, you never tell anybody that you are Métis, because that will limit your ability to get jobs or what kind of jobs you can get. And I thought, that's sad. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with Métis individuals, they didn't fit like the Indigenous people weren't very accepting at the time, and the European settlers weren't very accepting at the time. So they were a very ostracized and isolated group. My uncle and aunt and their family lived in Saratoga Park right up until my uncle passed away. And you're absolutely right. It's a beautiful area.
Oh, yes.
And the community was very tight-knit. And when I meet people from Saratoga Park, there's always that kind of fondness that they have for the area.
Yeah. We are hoping if we can be selected by TELUS Story Hive, those of us here on Bring Back the Porch, we are looking at doing an 8-part series on Saratoga Park. Its history, the people, the culture, and
there's a lot of interesting stories there. That's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, and there were some in the city who were in favor of those people down there, and they tried to make sure that nothing happened to them while they were living there. But there's a quote in, I think about 1958 or so, from a city council meeting where they were, one person was asking if, I think it was either electricity or natural gas to be extended to their property. And during the debate, one of the councillors said to something to the effect is that we shouldn't be talking about expanding services. We should be talking about bringing a bulldozer in and getting rid of those people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Some of those attitudes still persist to this day. I want to maybe ask you a little bit about because you've worked in media for a very long time.
Yeah, I knew Marconi.
And you've seen how attitudes have shifted and media itself has shifted.
Oh, yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about how you got into media?
Well, I suppose it probably goes back to when I was a little boy. I had a tabletop hockey set. And back then, there was only 6 teams in the NHL, and this tabletop hockey set had jerseys for all 6 teams. So I would play with my friends, and we would either be Boston and Detroit or Montreal and Toronto. It didn't matter. I knew all the players. So I would do the play-by-play. I wanted to be...
While you were playing?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I wanted to be like Foster Hewitt. And so that seed was there. And when I was, I think, grade 6, I was very fortunate to have a teacher. His name was Joe Lakey in Lethbridge. And he encouraged my creative writing abilities. And he told me in class, when I would read out loud, he said, you should look at a job on reading the news on the radio because you read so well. And I, okay, whatever, forgot about it. Years pass. I get out of high school, and I'm still like, okay, well, what am I going to do with my life? I really don't know. And there was a new television station opening in Lethbridge at that time because I grew up in Lethbridge.
So you were born here, but grew up in
My
Lethbridge.
dad was in construction, and
Okay.
we went back and forth between Métis and Lethbridge for a number of years, and finally my mom said, whoa, pick a place. So we happened to be in Lethbridge, so that's where we stayed. And one of the counselors at LCI had been in television, and she helped me to get in contact with them. And I had an interest in the cinematography as well. The job was being a news photographer to actually shoot film of news events. I thought, that'll be great. I love that. So I got the job, but then there was some federal money that was supposed to come through that did not come through, and the job sort of withered on the vine and never got to go to it. And I thought, well, I'll go to school. So Mrs. McLeod, who was the guidance counselor, gave me all of these calendars for schools, and I'm going, okay, one, looking, and I happen to have one from Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. And I'm looking at the right-hand page, cinematography, and it's like, okay, and I happen to look over on the left-hand side, broadcast journalism. What's that? And I'm reading, news, interviewing, sports play-by-play.
Yes.
The
ding,
seed.
Ding, ding.
Yeah, ding, 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 ding. I sent away my money, thought, okay, you just pay your tuition and you're in. Nope. I got home from work one day. My mom says, this man called from Fanshawe College in London, Ontario, wants to do an interview with you about your applications.
And how old were you at this time?
I would have been 19.
19?
So I just barely got in the house and taken off my shoes, and the phone rings, and it's Warren Michaels from Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. And for the next 40 to 45 minutes, he quizzed me about everything under the sun, about my current events knowledge, history knowledge, lots of things. And I hadn't eaten yet. And I'm starting to get a little ticked. And I think maybe a little bit of attitude might have leaked through. And he says, that's what I'm looking for.
Oh, really?
I want to see if there's a fire in your belly. And he says, you're in. I'll see you next month. Wow. So I went to a 2-year program at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. Got all kinds of opportunities. I was even in the Oval Office with the President of the United States.
No way.
Yes. Every morning at 11 o'clock, they have a news briefing. And that morning there was somebody from Brazil, some politician from Brazil. So they have a photo op in the Oval Office where the president and the guest are sitting in front of the fireplace. You still see those shots today.
Yes.
And the media put in their names to see if they get drawn to go and maybe ask a question, and when they're in there, just, be there. So myself and Ed Wilmot, another one of my classmates, we put our names in, and we got drawn. So
while you were still in school.
Still in school. Yep, just a couple of dumb kids from Canada. And so when it was time, if you see on TV, when you're looking at it on TV, when you're looking at the president who is at the podium, on the left, there's a door to their left. Well, that door, that's where we went through, and there's a sharp right or sharp left turn, and that's the hallway outside the Oval Office. And as you're standing there, if you look down the one hall, you can actually see that the room does bulge out. Oh. So we're waiting, and I'm looking around. Geez, a kid here from Alberta. I'm in the White House. Wow, I'm going to go in and see the president.
It's amazing.
And there was this antique dresser standing there, and I think, that's probably worth a lot of money. And I look underneath it, there's a mouse trap. I thought, I'm in the White House, the home of the President of the United States, and he has mice.
Or maybe not, because they set the traps.
Yeah. So that was kind of like, okay, it kind of brings you back down that people live the same, no matter where they are. So we went in, and, it was President Ford. He was just into office at that point. And
played by Chevy Chase on Saturday Night Live, for those of you who are familiar.
Yep. And, after they counted it down, and then it was turn off the TV lights and exit, please, gentlemen, and we were gone. But what I remember about the Oval Office was the rug. It had the seal of the President of the United States and stars for every state, and I have never seen a bluer blue in my life than in that rug. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, is it as fantastic as it look? Because sometimes when you actually go in and see something, it's like a disappointment. But sometimes it's like, whoa, the pictures did not do this justice.
Oh, no, they don't do it justice. Now I see that the current occupant in the White House has added a lot of gold and glitter to it. Yes. So it doesn't look the same as it did when I was there. And everybody has decorated it to their own tastes over the years. And I guess that's their prerogative. That is where they do their work. So.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a Brazilian.
It was somebody from South America. Yeah.
But
I don't remember who.
Nothing contentious at that time.
Oh no. It was they were throwing them softball questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how do you? So you learned how to kind of ask questions, or what was your? What was the training at that time?
Again, Warren Michaels, he saw something in me that I didn't know existed. Maybe it was that curiosity, but he insisted that I interview him. I got to talk to my instructor, and the butterflies are there. But he had previously had been the press secretary for not Richard Nixon. What was his first name? Nixon, who was the Liberal leader in Ontario at the time.
Yes.
And he had gone to China, and so he wanted me to talk to him about his trip to China. So I did the preparation and whatnot, and I found that I enjoyed just talking to people.
Yeah.
Conversations. Yeah, and I still, to this day, like talking to people.
Well, you do a lot of it, so that's good that you enjoy what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So those types of questions, I gather even from how you interview today, you are approaching it from a perspective of trying to draw information out of people. Mm-hmm. How do you feel the style of questioning in media has changed since you were the 19-year-old student at Vanshaw College?
Way more polite back then.
Yeah.
Today it's a blood sport, and on all sides. And to me, the issue is the internet has allowed for the spread of disinformation to the point where nobody knows what to believe anymore.
Right.
And you have people who dig in their heels because they've got a piece of paper that says this right here, and you better believe it. And if you don't, they have to demonize you. And we've lost the ability to sit down and talk to each other.
Yes.
Like, understand your position, why you think the way you do. And to me, that's sad.
Yeah, and I think a loss of nuance, that there's a lot of gray. Mm-hmm. Very few things can be divided into heroes and villains. Very few things, but we kind of try and do that now. Do you feel like the change in media is so the internet for sure, but do you feel like the change in media has led to the type of politics, the divisive kind of politics we're seeing now, or vice versa? Or are they both, do you think they're both kind of just internet driven?
I think that Watergate played a big part in that. And
Interesting.
I've been to the Watergate Hotel on that same field trip. We stayed in the rooms where the people who were bugging the Democratic.
No way.
Yes, we were able to look out the windows because that was part of Warren's. He wanted you to immerse yourself in the moment so you could understand as much as you could from all sides of an issue. And so I think the public lost trust in their elected officials at that point, and there were some in the media who made hay through that, became celebrities, drank the Kool-Aid. Because there was one thing that was drummed into me, is that people, not reporters, make the news.
Right.
The reporter is not the story.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. You just ask the questions, let everybody else make up their mind. You don't try to make up their minds for you. And that's why I've always resisted when people have asked me to write editorials, because my opinion doesn't matter.
Right.
I have one opinion, and it's not the right one always.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge shift as well, where there, in some cases, is a bit of a blurred line between what's the news and what's opinion. Mm-hmm. How have you seen that develop over the last few decades?
Well, I think that a lot of journalists, it's now show business.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not right. We in the media should not be part of the story. We're just there to ask questions on behalf of the public. And whether we're stars or not, it doesn't matter. But yet, it's ratings and, egos and all of that kind of stuff.
Advertising revenue.
Yeah. We need to get this show on the air, and you got to start pushing the needle higher, or you're going to be out of work.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be out of work then, because my integrity is worth more than money on a contract.
Hey, it's Lynette from Bring Back The Porch. This wraps up part 1 of our talk with Mayor Linnsie Clark. Stay tuned for for episode 2, coming soon.